Today, some tips, tricks, and hardware recommendations for capturing better night sky and Milky Way images. Well, hey everybody, it's Hudson. Welcome to this week's Approaching the Scene. Got some really fun stuff to talk about this week. I've been doing a lot of Milky Way photography, and the community's kind of asked me to chime in on what I think of the Move Shoot Move star tracker, a little 1.3 pound, not so expensive, lightweight star tracker. And I think a lot of it. So I'm going to share that with you. I fully intend to do a low light kind of night sky and Milky Way short photo course over the next few months. But I want to just put some information out. A lot of people have been asking, and make sure that those of you who want to get out there and get working on night sky shots have the opportunity to do so, and recommend some equipment and some techniques and field tips and workflow tips just that I've learned over the last couple of years. This has been a long-term project of mine to just get cleaner, better looking Milky Way shots that can scale up to high resolution and print and look great. I think there's a lot of Milky Way shots out there that look stupendous on Instagram or Facebook, but if you were to ask for a large print of them, you'd be like, whew, there's a lot of noise. Those stars aren't really pinpoint. They break down when you zoom in, and it's kind of the holy grail I've been chasing for a while is the high quality Milky Way shot. And I've done a lot with stacking images and star trackers and different star trackers, so I'm going to share some of the stuff that I've learned today. I'm also going to give a little retraction about Foolography's Unleashed. I talked about some things it couldn't do that it actually can. They touched base with me and talked me through how I missed a couple of functions for doing long exposures with this little tiny Bluetooth transmitter that plugs into your camera, and that works really well with the Z6 and Z7. And I've talked about it before. I like it. It's really cool how low profile it is and how it lets you do stuff like this night sky work so easily. And I'll talk about how that integrates into the workflow, as well as a little bit of lens and hardware recommendations. I'm also going to address a question that someone from the community asked about f4 lenses versus f2.8 lenses and how important that difference really is compared to the expense and weight that we're talking about. As well as at the very end, I'll talk about Nikon's announcement of an announcement about the Z6 and Z7 IIs. I'll give you my take on that really briefly. All right, and again, thanks to everybody who's been subscribing, liking, sharing this channel. It really is your user input that drives the content here. And for anybody that wants to skip around and jump to a specific section or rewatch just part of the video, as always, there's a sort of chaptered, sectioned thing. If you run along the timeline, you can just click into what part of this you want to watch, like chapters. They're described. And if you go into the description for the video, you'll find links to all these products, including a discount code for Move Shoot Move. I really love this thing. And as cheap as it is, I can get you another 5% off if you jump in there and use that affiliate link of mine. And for everyone who's been using my affiliate links, thanks so much. So in that description, you'll find a clicked link, table of contents with time codes, as well as affiliate links to all the products that I talk about, or links to other videos that I talk about during the course of this video. All right, so let's jump in. Let's talk about shooting the Milky Way. All right, so this is the image that I want to use to talk about my latest thoughts on capturing the Milky Way. Over the years, I've shot a lot of images where it's just a single exposure, and you're working with maybe 30 seconds, 3200 ISO, f2.8, something like that. And invariably, the results wind up being somewhat grainy, or the exposure's a little too long and the stars are trailing a bit, or your lens doesn't have quite the right optics and you wind up with weird chromatic aberration and kind of artifacts, the way the stars start flaring out like birds in the corners of the image. And it had me chasing heavier, more expensive, wider angle, faster aperture lenses. And then I kind of started moving into a realm where I thought about, well, let's use some of the newest techniques for shooting a series of images of the Milky Way, and then using software to blend those to get all the stars together. Shorter duration images, higher ISO, and then this software like Starry Landscape Stacker will actually get rid of the noise and align the stars. And that software works well, but I started noticing that the best examples of Milky Way that I was seeing were from people using star trackers. And I've used a number of different star trackers in the intervening couple of years, most of which are big and heavy and make it sort of awkward to carry much gear very far from your car. And then along came a suggestion from one of my Approach in the Scene subscribers, one of you folks, to check out Move Shoot Move's product, which is this little 1.3 pound star tracker with an amazing laser pointer alignment system that fits in this pouch. The whole thing's 1.3 pounds. You throw in a 1 pound ball head. We'll talk about why I'm using a ball head in a second. And you've got yourself 2.3 extra pounds, and you can use any lens in your kit that does a good job and has low chromatic aberration shooting backlight, because you're going to have the camera rotating along with the Earth on the same axis so that it tracks the stars, and you're just going to composite two images. You shoot one for the foreground, you shoot one for the night sky, and blend the two. So I've been practicing, and I really think that this kit, for most people that are following this channel, is going to be an amazing buy. It's affordable, it's light. I've talked to the company, they're really responsive, they seem great. I actually have an affiliate link set up through them, and there's a discount code if you go into my links in the video description. And so, you know, essentially, this little box is the star tracker. It's got a rechargeable battery built in, you plug it into USB, it charges up, you got about 2 hours runtime. And if you're out doing a bunch of work or on a trip, you can bring along, you know, a USB battery bank and run the thing right off a battery bank or charge it from a battery bank really easily. I advocate putting an Arca Swiss dovetail on the base of it where you would normally mount it to a mounting stud on your tripod. That way you can use it with whatever pan and tilt head you're using. I'm a big advocate, as everyone knows, of either a fluid head, my Manfrotto fluid heads, or a pan and tilt head like this Acrotech. And I'll put a link to the video where I have this lightweight tripod system with the pan and tilt head. This is a sub 4 pound system complete with a pan and tilt. So I'll put a Arca Swiss dovetail link for a really nice Kirk one that'll work well with this. You clamp it into your pan and tilt head. You're going to angle it so that it's going to be angled facing the North Star, essentially. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And then in the kit, you'll find this whole thing's a nice metal case. It also has a little metal mounting clamp and a laser pointer that is ludicrously powerful. Don't point this in anyone's eyes. Don't aim it towards any planes moving in the sky, and don't run it for more than 60 seconds at a time or it can burn itself up. It's that bright and that gets that hot inside. So you're going to turn, it's like a lightsaber into the sky. I'll show you a phone photo I took of using it at night. It's crazy, it's fun. It seems very, very sci-fi like. So you're going to put that laser pointer in this little clamp so that it's sticking up through it, and tighten the little plastic screw against it so that it's locked in place, and then just clamp that onto the Move Shoot Move's body. Doesn't really matter where, it's going to be close enough. You make sure it's nice and snug on there. And then you need a ball head. Why do you need a ball head, right? Hudson doesn't like ball heads. Well, I'm not a giant fan of using ball heads in general for my regular photography for a variety of reasons you probably know as a fan of this channel. But when you have to set up at an angle, you can't get level beneath, a pan and tilt head is a terrible thing. You know, a fluid head's a terrible thing. That's where a ball head can be really handy. Now, let's say you're setting up a camera on a tilted slider for a time lapse where the slider's moving with the camera sort of up. You need a ball head to be able to get level from an unlevel base. So right now this thing's tilted to point towards the North Star. I need the ball head to be able to get the camera wherever I want in a level fashion easily. So for this shot that I captured that we're going to talk about on the southern Oregon coast with my friend Charlie, I used Nikon's 20mm 1.8. That's a really great night sky lens. It's really sharp at f1.8, has almost no coma or chromatic aberration. And I'm using Acrotech's little 1 pound GXP ball head. That is my favorite ball head on earth. When I was doing work with Acrotech and getting the panorama head, they told me, I said I don't like ball heads, and they said, well, you have to try our GXP. It works as a gimbal. You can flip it upside down, take the panning base off of it, put it on top, and use it as a panorama head. It's got all of its parts exposed. You can wash the entire thing out with water. It never needs any maintenance. It weighs a pound, holds 50 pounds. It is a great head. If you can afford it, it is, I think, the best ball head on the planet. Now, I don't use a ball head a ton, but I love it. I love the lever clamp that they make too, with the big built-in level on the side. So you get set up, and I like to set the ball head on it so that you spin it on there and then twist your pan so that your notch that would let you go to a portrait orientation if you were on a normal tripod with a ball head is sticking up, so it lets you shoot any place that you want and tilt the camera further over. And now what you got to do once you got that all set up and locked in place, tighten all your adjustments so nothing's loose, and then you want to make sure that you're level. Right now I'm level, but I hold onto my camera and I've got a leveling adapter built into these Leo Photo legs, and I'm looking at the big, easy to see bubble level in the center of the Acratech head. I'm level from beneath, and now all you're going to do is look up in the night sky for the Big Dipper, and the leading edge of the Big Dipper points directly towards the North Star. You can look online, there's plenty of charts and diagrams to lay that out if you're not sure where to look for the North Star. There are apps on your phone that'll help point it out. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you're going to be pointing towards a specific point in the Southern Cross. You can find that online easily too. And you just want to go ahead and flip on that laser pointer. There's a little battery in there. You want to make sure that's charged. It comes with a charger. You just plug in the wall. It comes out like any flashlight battery would. And when you turn this thing on in the dark, you're going to see a green beam like a lightsaber going right up into space. Don't turn it on for more than 60 seconds at a time. But with the pan and tilt, it's really easy. You just tilt the head until it's lined up at exactly the same height as the North Star, Polaris, and then loosen your pan and pan the head till it's dead pointed at Polaris, making that star look green. Boom, you're set. Lock that pan and tilt head, turn off the laser pointer so you don't blind any pilots or walk into it and blind yourself. And then you can set up your scene and get the composition you want. And now I would advocate doing a very long exposure. You can do some light painting on your scene if you want to do a little bit of light painting. Get that foreground exposure, dial it in, shoot it, and then you can shoot it again for the Milky Way with the Star Tracker activated. And all you have to do to activate this move, shoot, move, there's only 2 buttons on the entire thing. You hold the one on the right down until all the lights flash, and by default, it's set for the Northern Hemisphere and for star speed. To turn it off, you just hold that button down again until all the lights on the front of it flash and it shuts off. If it's N highlighted and that star highlighted, it's rotating at the correct speed for the Northern Hemisphere. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you can use the other button to switch to Southern Hemisphere mode and which mode you're in. You can scroll around. There's different modes. They're half star speed. That's not a thing I would generally use. So you're going to want to take an image for the foreground. You're going to want to take an image for the Milky Way. Now I'm going to jump in and show you the last set that I did down in Secret Beach. I'm going to jump into Lightroom for a second. And the way that I was down with my good friend Charlie Johnson, these are some shots from Kauai when we were in a workshop together. And the two of us set up, we got very different compositions. He was working with his 14 to 30 millimeter f4. I was working with the 20 millimeter 1.8. And here is kind of our foreground scene. You can see, we lit the foreground a bit. Everything's nice and sharp, but the stars are trailing because I was shooting this at, well, let's see, what was my exposure? I'm going to come out of the full view and have a look here. My exposure is 101 seconds, so a little more than a minute and a half. Then I've got the star exposure. That's after the star tracker's activated, and you've got a nice, clear, not very noisy Milky Way with pinpoint stars because the camera's tracking it. However, your foreground is all blurred because the foreground's still and the camera is moving. So you're going to have to blend those two images, and you can get a result that looks really, really nice. We had a Lume Cube 2, which has a low light mode, perfect for this kind of astro stuff, with an orange gel filter set up on just the other side of this knob. I kept climbing up this thing above this crazy pool with waves moving around and adjusting it till we got the lighting right, and it was just lighting the back of the scene for us to light this C-stack a little bit and get some detail in the shadows. Very, very soft setting. That's one thing great about the Lume Cube 2.0 is that low light setting that just puts out a little tiny bit of light for things like this so it can be subtle. Now, in doing all that, I learned a couple things. One is, if you've got a flat horizon, something that's simple. It's pretty easy to do it in 2 shots from the same tripod location, and then just maybe transform, take that one layer that you're blending into the foreground up a little bit to get rid of the blurred foreground that would be in the other one. In a complicated scene like this, I made the mistake of shooting the 2 from the same location at the same time, and the masking job and work that I had to do to get rid of the blurred elements that were sort of coming in from the left and up from the bottom and the trees sticking out was really, really difficult. It took a lot of cloning, a lot of healing tool, masking part of the image out and moving it one way, you know, just to kind of cover up that blurred landscape, because if I moved up, another part was exposed. If I moved to the right, another part was exposed. So I'd really suggest that for your compositing work, and we'll talk more about this in the course that I'm going to put out, shooting a complicated foreground, just set up and shoot it and get that look that you're after, and then shoot the Milky Way, step back from it and get in a position where you can shoot the Milky Way sort of on its own and then blend those 2 images together. It's going to be a lot easier compositing job. And that brings up kind of an ethical question. Well, can't you just shoot a beautiful Milky Way somewhere and blend it into whatever night photo you want? And of course you can. You know, it's just like everybody does sky replacements, but you know, I think that for me personally, it's the thrill of getting what I saw in a beautiful representation that I can print huge on the wall. So for me, I'm still going to want to set it up and capture it the way that I saw it. I might move to get the foreground out of the way to capture the image for the Milky Way to blend in, but I'm going to blend it in where it was in the scene that I was looking at. And I think most people that are out in the beautiful locations shooting night photography are going to know if the Milky Way is in a place that it never actually happens in an iconic place. So, you know, it's just a thought. Everyone's going to treat that a little bit differently. Now, I promised that I'd do a little retraction on something that I said recently about Foolography's Unleashed, which is a really cool little tool. I got to turn on my Nikon here. I'm going to go ahead and just cover the lens cap. It's going to be a dark scene. And I want to go ahead, light this up, and I want to make sure I'm recording. Give me 1 second. I'm going to get this so that I can actually record what I'm doing on my phone at the same time as I'm talking to you. So I'm going to fire up their app, which is called Unleashed. Little tiny connector. There's a Bluetooth connection that just ties into my Z6 or Z7, and then it gets power from the USB-C port. It draws very little power off the camera. And once it's activated and turned on, I can control my camera and even preview the images that I capture right here on my phone or my tablet. So what I said before when I showcased the Move Shoot Move was that it really limits you out at 30 seconds, and that I was worried about, well, it's difficult to shoot long exposures longer than 30 seconds. And what I didn't notice, sometimes I'm moving through things too much. So, you know, we could go in here, we set our ISO to 800, we set our aperture to, well, we can go 1.8, 2.8. And then once you go into shutter speed, if you set it to bulb, then if you go into long exposure, all of a sudden it opens up a whole world beyond 30 seconds. And that's what I hadn't realized. So I wound up using 1.7 minutes for this exposure to get what I was after. And I think that that it's just, you know, that's something that I missed. I didn't realize you have to set it in bulb for shutter speed, and then there's a long exposure button. And one of the nice things about the long exposure is that it's set up in thirds of a stop, so it just continues in those thirds of a stop. That's why you've got interesting numbers here. So it goes 1.3, 1.5, 1.7, 1.9, 2.1, 2.4. It starts getting longer. It's each one of these is a third of a stop as you move up in time. So it's geared to do really long exposures up into the hours, which is super cool. It'll go up to 4.6 hours. And you can just walk away. It'll control your camera. So that's a really cool feature I had missed before. Mea culpa to those folks at Foolography who make the Unleashed. It's a really cool tool. For those that have it, you forget it's plugged in on the side of your camera. And it was great using it that night. So jumping back in here one more time, just looking at the exposure settings that I used for the Milky Way shot. It was, let's jump out of full frame mode here, 20 millimeters, f1.8, 100, well, it was that 1.7 minutes at ISO 640. So a really nice, clean image out of the Z7. Super, super, super good. Again, you know, I wouldn't leave that foreground scene that's especially that complicated in the frame when I was doing it if I had the choice. But I think that this setup doesn't put much weight in your bag, doesn't take much money out of your wallet, especially as compared to buying some, you know, Zeiss 15mm Distagon lens or something to try to do the best quality Milky Way work that you can do. And it really enables you to do more with less. My buddy Charlie was shooting at the same time as I was, and he was using his 14 to 30 1.4, which also has a really high quality output for night sky work. It just doesn't have a really fast aperture. So my exposures were 1.7 minutes. His exposures were over 5 minutes, and the Move Shoot Move did a really fine job keeping his camera steady for 5+ minutes. It was frustrating whenever he'd make kind of a mistake and he'd have to wait 5 minutes to be like, oh wait, no, I got to redo that. There was one shot I'm gonna talk out of school on Charlie. He left his lens cap on, and it was a 5-minute mistake before he realized, why is there nothing there? Another tip I'll give you for focusing, especially with, you know, mirrorless cameras, this setup is best suited to a lighter weight system. You know, the Z6 and the Z7 by Nikon, Sony's A7 cameras, a lot of the recent offerings by Fuji, you know, you name it, the lightweight camera is going to work better on here. I'm excited to try it with Nikon's new 14 to 24 2.8 lens, because that's billed as being a camera or a lens with almost no chromatic aberration or coma for star work. The same thing said about this 20mm 1.8, which is cheaper and faster and just razor sharp at 1.8. It has almost no coma and chromatic aberration. It's nice and light. I love it, and it's a beautiful night sky lens. With the star tracker, it winds up not being limited in the fact that it's only 20mm. It's not ultra wide. You're not worried about star trails the same way because you can use the tracker to keep that at bay. Someone asked me recently why someone would invest in 2.8 lenses like the new 14 to 24 2.8 when you've got such high quality f4 lenses. You know, let's say the 70 to 200 2.8 versus the 24 to 70 2.8 that just came out and that I love so much versus, you know, a 24 to 70 f4, which I love also, and it's a great lens. You know, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. I think when it comes down to a 70 to 200, to me, having a 70 to 200 2.8 lets me work in lower light with faster moving subjects at a lower ISO. It also lets me isolate my subject from the background just a little bit more. There's a big difference between f2.8 and f4 at those 105mm focal lengths and 200mm focal lengths. It really lets you blur the background. And they tend to put more high-end glass and coatings on those lenses, and they have a little bit better bokeh and just a better, more aesthetic looking out of focus area in the back. So for me, the longer lenses, having them a little bit wider makes more sense to me. I'm absolutely loving this new 70 to 200 2.8. With the 24 to 70, I personally see no real reason to invest in the 2.8. I know it's great. I know it's got a better image quality than my lightweight 24 to 70 f4, but I love the size and the weight of the 24 to 70 f4, and it's razor sharp. It puts out a great quality image. For landscape and travel stuff, you know, this isn't the lens I'm going to use for portraits and for blurring the background and for shooting fast-moving subjects at a distance. But when it comes to a wide-angle lens, I think it really matters on how much low-light work you do. You know, for wide-angle landscapes in reasonable light, or where you don't have leaves blowing in the wind and you can have a long shutter speed to keep a low ISO, an f4 lens can be fine. That 14 to 30 Nikon that I'm using is a fantastic lens. I love the fact it takes filters. If you stop it down to 5.6, it's nice and sharp. I think that the 14 to 24 is a night sky lover's lens, and if you like to do stuff at night or if you like to shoot low lit events with wide angles, then that faster aperture really does make itself worthwhile. If you can afford it, it's worth getting. It just all depends on what you're doing with your equipment, like anything else. So then the final thing to talk about today really is the new announcement about the Nikon Z7 II and the Z6 II. There were rumors that were going to be called S's. There have been rumors left, right, and center. In reality, we don't know anything for sure. A lot of the rumors have proven to be true in recent times by sources such as Nikon Rumors website. If what I hear is true, it'll have dual card slots. To me, that's not a big deal. I only know of one XQD card failure that I've heard of from anyone. That they're so robust, those cards. I think maybe for the high-end event shooter where they're working on a really high day rate for really demanding clients, and the thought of a failure at a wedding is just unthinkable. That second card slot's going to provide peace of mind. For me, I'll set it to overflow. I've just had no problems with XQDs. Most of the time, I probably won't even put an SD card in the second slot. They're going to have a bigger buffer. That would be great. When I'm shooting action with the Z6 and the Z7, I'm often wishing for a bigger buffer where I could just fire more frames without sort of feeling like it slows down to try to write to that fast XQD card. It's supposed to have improved autofocus performance. That's exciting. And then finally, it's going to run on USB-C power. You can plug, say this battery pack we were talking about with the Move Shoot Move Star Tracker, plug it directly into the camera, run the camera off external power, or plug it into the wall in the studio. I right now use a Tether Tools case relay system with a dummy battery, and it would be nice to not need that, to just have a good quality USB-C cord from a big, heavy duty power pack like this. This will run the camera for 2 straight nights, 3 straight nights without even running out of juice. It'd be nice not to have to carry the extra cords and one more thing wrapped up in there. But I think that as far as image quality goes, it sounds like it's going to be exactly the same sensor. And I will definitely be getting them and testing them. Whether I keep them both or not, it'll be kind of up in the air. If I do decide to keep them both, I'll be selling my Z6 and Z7. I think they're going to be a nice improvement, particularly for people that shoot action or people that want to be connected to power all the time while they're using their camera. Anyhow, we'll find out. We don't have to wait too much longer, and we'll know, and we'll have some more stuff to talk about for the Nikon aficionados. All right, everybody. So thanks so much for tuning in. One big thing that we're doing now, which I announced during our office hours last week. Office hours are another thing. I invite you to go to hudsonhenry.com/office hours. It's a free meeting during this time when few of us can be out making big trips, particularly as groups, without fear of getting sick. We have meetings every other week to talk about photographic specifics. We talked about projects and how that can relate to your practice of photography this week. Had a great discussion, big turnout, wonderful group of people. It's a free Zoom meeting. You can also attend via YouTube Live. We do Q&A. Rick LePage, Woody, Darren, and I all hang out, and we have a really good time. There's a set of regulars and a bunch of new people showing up too, and it's a lot of fun. We also launched a thing out of that called projects, and right now there's only one spot in the first project. We're going to be launching and announcing more projects, but it's essentially a small group of 10, very interactive, intensive, week-long, short-form course on photography where we have Q&A sessions, live video chats, a connection source where all of us are in touch all the time to ask each other questions. We'll be sharing images, going through each other's work, learning from one another, and I'll put out all the tools, tips, and tricks that I know about the subject and be working with you intensively over the week that we're doing it. It's kind of a neat thing during this particular age where I can't be out doing the big group workshops in the epic locations, which is my favorite thing I've ever done professionally. But one of the things I love about those is the camaraderie, joining as a group, working together on a project, looking through each other's eyes at different things, seeing what each other see, learning from one another and forming bonds and friendships that last beyond the workshop. And I think this is what we're trying to do with this project at a much lower price. For a tiny fraction of what it would cost on going on a big location workshop, we can get a lot of what's great that happens on those location workshops with some self-directed work and group learning time. So I'll put a link to that in the video description too. Go check out the projects. We'll be announcing more of those soon. Thanks to everybody for watching, for sharing, for taking part. Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe, have fun, keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.